awesome. I just had a guy ask me about work-life balance. I mean, that is a huge change over time, and that's nothing derogatory toward the men. It's just that was the way it was done. You were at work, and they realized that there are dual parenting responsibilities, and then saying, hey, I'm going to be late in this part of your meeting tomorrow because my wife's out of town and I need to get my daughter on the bus. Yes, that's awesome. I mean, I think they're surprised at my reaction because I'm so psyched they asked. But maybe I should do it more often. But there's really been a change. So, you know, unless you work for an organization that really is unfriendly, then I would just think about where you're working, because that's a huge part of your life. Family balance is picking the right place to engage yourself on a professional side.
Can I just add really quickly? I think the other part of this is the fact that you're aware of it. And in my experience, I've seen women principally, but others, you know, men too, who are balancing, and because of what's needed when their children are young, they give it all when they're at work. I haven't seen a person yet who let anything slip, because she was so aware and protective of trying to, you know, kind of manage career and expectations. And I think that, you know, the fact that you've raised it also it suggests to me that you should have kind of ongoing dialogue with the people that you work with. Check in from time to time. Ask the question. I think the tools today do make it easier. The cell phone, the BlackBerry, the computer, it makes it easier to do things from afar. And, you know, I've had my kids visited the emergency because one of them was really clumsy all the time. So he was always in urgent care, and I was always like, you know, they tell you to turn the cell phone off, and I wasn't. You know, so sneaking, cowering in the corner while, you know, kind of watching the doctor attend to him, trying to respond to a conference call. But it's possible to do it, and use the tools to your best advantage.
I'd like to know what your past employers have done to support your work-life balance, and what you would have liked them to do to support that work-life balance.
One of my past employers allowed me, at a time when it wasn't really clear that you could do this, a 4-day work week. And what that did for me personally is give me my Friday, which meant that everything else that I had to do happened on Friday, so I had a concentrated 2 days over the weekend with my family. And that gave me a little bit of space. I think it helped other women in the team, but it also gave me a little bit of space to have time with my family. Since then, though, I work for organizations that just, you know, maybe it's the time frame, but they seem to get it. They understand that you make concessions. Sometimes you leave early to go to a recital, but you're going to make it up at another point in time. And I think there's a recognition that with the tools that we have today, you never really turn your work off. You're always thinking about it. Or you may be taking, you know, calls or managing things at home or over the weekend. And I think there's a sense that there's a fairness there. There's a balance. There's some trading and bartering back and forth.
You know, one of the greatest things that an employer ever did for me in the workplace was show me by example what that it was okay to have a strong family life and work hard at the same time. And he showed by example that you could work hard and still be the first one out the door to your kid's soccer game if that was happening. And he was open about it. He said, I gotta go. My guy's got a game right now. And he was open about it, but then he was also an extremely hardworking person. And so people working under him saw that by example, that you can have family be a priority in your life and still get a whole lot of work done too. So that was the greatest thing that employer ever did for me.
I would say that it's much different here in Cleveland than it was in New York City, because there was no really family balance, especially not for men. You know, you worked all the time, and when I was pregnant at my last employer in New York City, there was barely a policy for maternity leave. We were sort of creating it for me, and it was a large corporation. But for the most part, you know, there was none of that. And when I moved here, it's drastically different. I mean, my current employer is just exactly as Caprice said. You know, you work very intensely, you get it done, and you take off, and the work gets done. So it's different here for me.
As a new mother who just dropped my daughter off at daycare for the first time yesterday. One, I actually have two questions. One, with the daycare, the choice to stay at home, if you have that choice, it seems like you get a lot of raised eyebrows by choosing to stay at work. Maybe not as much as used to, but how do you deal with that? And then the second thing would be how to best manage it. I was raised by a stay-at-home mom, and so the responsibilities were very defined between the mom and the dad as to who does what. But having two working parents, how do you juggle that with your spouse when he has his own career demands and I have my own? How do you handle that?
You know, I keep his calendar on my calendar for after work, and I know he does the same for me. So when I'm scheduling a meeting, I try to avoid the time that I know, the zoning board is going to be meeting, and Tom's not going to be available to take the guy to, one of our kids to a cello lesson. I just make sure I time my things so that it's compatible with his schedule too, and that's one thing. I wonder when someone's raising their eyebrows if maybe they're just impressed. So I'm divorced, so I'm obviously not the one to answer this question about negotiating. However, I did just do a workshop on negotiating, and the title was "We Have Not Because We Ask Not." And so I think it is about looking for what we need, what we want in help and support from our spouses. And we often do amazing work in negotiating for our clients and at work. So taking those negotiating skills home and negotiating to split up those family responsibilities, I think we just bring those skills to our homes.
Oh, I think you bring up a good point, and I just...
Like a divorce? Oh, no.
For my husband, he's listening. No. About the communication and the need for communication. And it's not just constant talk about like what he needs and you need. Part of it is recognizing that what you're putting together, maybe neither of you have seen before. My husband had a stay-at-home mother, and so, and he had not been exposed to the legal profession at all, so that was a shocker for him. And we're constantly talking, and what we found is most effective, believe it or not, is a 15-minute walk. Where we can just kind of decompress from the day and talk about what's happening tomorrow. He refuses to calendar well. And so I think over time, I've just developed a higher level of flexibility, but also understanding that there's sometimes we just have to make hard choices. So, having that emergency caregiver, having a neighbor who can help you out, talking to your friends, because I think friendships, other women, I wasn't lucky enough to have family members in Cleveland, so we were really trying to do this with a babysitter, a caregiver who was about 40 minutes away. So we were constantly kind of shifting and balancing, and I think you just can see that the conversation you have today is different than what you'll have 5 years from now, but keep having it.
I like to address the first part of your question of dropping your child off for the first time. That's a really, really hard thing to do, no matter how you slice it. There's just no easy way. You're going to cry, you're going to feel guilty, you're going to feel terrible, you're going to feel like partly exhilarated that you have this free time and you're all of a sudden alone in the car. And so, you can turn up music and you're still singing, Bernie. And so really go easy on yourself, and it doesn't really matter what other people say. You're making a decision that you and your husband have decided is a good one for you. So be easy on yourself for this first 3 to 6 months as you go through this time, because it's hard. It was hard for all of us to do that.
We're dealing with how you deal with people looking at you has always been a challenge for me. In my past career, I always felt like I didn't fit in either world. I didn't feel like I felt in the finance realm, in the man's world. I didn't feel like I felt at home with all of my friends who were stay-at-home moms when I lived back in New York. And there was one day that we were taking clients to golf. I was the only female on the force, and we happened to show up at the club. It was men's day. We didn't know it. I couldn't go.